Welcome to Supply Chain Now, the voice of global supply chain. Supply Chain Now focuses on the best in the business for our worldwide audience, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and today's critical issues, the challenges and opportunities. Stay tuned to hear from those making global business happen right here on Supply Chain Now.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Scott Luton here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's show. Hey, today we've got a great show lined up where we're going to be talking leadership, education, the extraordinary power of the new talent coming in the industry these days, and of course, you know, supply chain. So with that said, I want to welcome in our esteemed guests here today. We have Leslie Smith, Lieutenant General, U.S. Army, retired. I think I got that right, General
That's
Smith.
right.
Who now serves as CEO of the LV Smith Corporate Group. Les, how you doing, sir?
I'm good. Good to see you again, Scott.
You as well. I enjoyed our warm-up conversation, and now the real deal. Looking forward to getting your POV here today. And you've brought with you a colleague of sorts, Jerry Burke, Professor of Logistics and Supply Chain Management at Georgia Southern University. Jerry, how you doing, sir?
Hey, never better.
Never better. That's right. It is, you know, on that note, it is an intriguing time to be in supply chain, you know, warts and all, as someone famous once said. And it presents a ton of opportunity and innovation. And gosh, what y'all are doing at Georgia Southern University, engaging these young minds that are going to bring a lot of solutions to what we're fighting through. I bet life is never been better, Jerry.
Yeah, doing well here. Thank you.
All right. So Les and Jerry, before we get into the heavy lifting, and we're going to talk more about the program there, the program on the grow, we're going to talk about industry and some other things, but let's get to know you both better first. And Les, I want to start with you. Sure. I had a sneak peek into the Les Smith story way back when I saw you when you were still in the Army, when you addressed a Vetlanta event at UPS World Headquarters. And I was like, man, we got to get this guy on a podcast. And now you continue to do big things. Tell us, though, where did you grow up, and talk about your upbringing?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, but I would say I'm from Atlanta and Mississippi. So my family came here when I was, before I can remember. I was born here in the city of Atlanta.
Okay.
But my father died when I was 5. So my mom had a decision to make of what she wanted to do and who she wanted to expose her children to. So instead of going back to Mississippi, great thing to place and go and visit, she chose to keep me. I'm the middle kid, by the way, my brother, who's younger than me, and my sister in the city of Atlanta, so we could have access and exposure to positive things and going from there. Are we going to talk about anecdotes coming up later, or you want to talk about it now?
No, gosh, there's so much there. I mean,
Yes.
Your mom made a big decision, made that
She
sacrifice, kept y'all together so you could be exposed to some of the great things that Atlanta had to offer. Tell us more about your upbringing. What else sticks out? Yeah,
well, I will tell you that. So while my father died, he's a Korean War vet too. I always knew what was the expectations for me. So there was no. So, you can't feel sorry for yourself. There are things that as a Smith man, you're expected to be and expected to do. So at a young age in Mississippi, I saw business people doing things. I saw logistics of, my uncles who were had farms and had businesses and how they got things from place to place. So it was inculcated in me in a young age. So I think your environment has a lot to do with where you go, not necessarily what your circumstances are, but the environment that you're placed in, and you get going from there. And we'll talk about Georgia Southern later, but it played a key role in part of that too.
Wonderful. Looking forward to that. And, we talked before I shift over to Jerry, we talked last week on the prep conversation, how folks that serve in the military,
yes,
they just keep serving. They keep serving. That's I mean, right. Gosh, your family has a legacy and you continue to fulfill it. So that is incredible. So Jerry, let's talk about where did you grow up, and let's talk about your upbringing a little bit.
Well, I grew up a lot of places. My father was in the Navy, a enlisted man. And so we traipsed up and down the East Coast for the most part. I was born in Jacksonville Beach, Florida.
Okay.
Very young, went to Puerto Rico, on to Virginia Beach, Orlando, Charleston.
You weren't lying.
Key West, and then back to Jacksonville for high school. So ended up, he retired in Jacksonville, and I finished up high school in Jacksonville. And that's sort of my background and where I grew up.
Let me ask you a question, Jerry. So moving around through all those formative years, how did I impact? How did you adjust? Getting to know and meet new people every couple of years, it sounds.
Well, I mean, in a way, we had some stability in the family. I had 2 sisters and a younger brother, and mom and dad, obviously. So we were a 6-pack moving around. And so we had some stability with that, but it was always hard every 2 or 3 years, especially at the time. It was viewed as a huge negative, leaving friends and familiar environments. But now I look back on those experiences as opportunities, a way for me to develop my adaptability and to cope with uncertainty, which is something that, it's hard for young people to think about that kind of uncertainty. So I got to experience it early on in my life.
All right. So I'm going to ask you both, kind of think of a rapid fire response here. So when you think of toys or you think of food in your upbringing, what do you look back on now and say, man, if I didn't have that, it would have been a different childhood? And I got to start with you.
Fried chicken.
Oh, I'm with you. You have a favorite? Have you had Hattie B's yet? They came to Atlanta a couple of years ago.
No, I have not. No, all right. No, my mom's fried chicken. Yeah. Okay. There's a requirement in my family for that. Every birthday, I will have fried chicken.
Well, hey, we'll have to compare recipes.
Okay.
And I'll buy Hattie B's on me in the weeks ahead. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So that's going to be tough to top, Jerry. What about you?
Well, mine's more on the sports side. Again, like I said, moving around a lot, the way you could connect was to actually play sports. And, with the military bases, a lot of times they have, organized leagues and things like that. So I got to play football and basketball and baseball and get to meet people that way. So without sports, I think it would have been much harder.
That's such a great, that probably goes unsaid so often. And that's such an important part of our upbringing. All right.
I agree with that if I could.
Yeah, please.
As a senior commander and, having my kids grow up and the biggest thing that if I could get kids, and that my wife, Anidra, always talked about this, how we could get our kids into whatever program we had at base A to go to base B, because then they'll have something forward to look to. Mm-hmm. And they wouldn't feel like outsiders. And I think that's critical, not only in the military, but as we know, people will move around. How do we make sure they can have that stability for the family, which in turn helps the workforce? Agreed.
That outsider label can be so tough when you're in those early years and grade school and whatnot. So well said there. So let's shift gears. As much as I would love to explore more stories from y'all's upbringing, because I'm convinced we're not getting to some good stuff, but I'll save that for a later show. Let's talk about leadership, one of our favorite topics around here. So prior to your current roles, when you look back and you think of, one stop of that long, successful military journey, Les Smith, or, part of your background, your journey, Jerry, what's one role that really shaped how you look at the world? And let's go with Jerry first here.
Yes. Good.
Well, I was the first to go to college in my family, so I was pretty naive getting into the university and was not a very good undergraduate student, to be honest, and worked my way through college, supervising people in food service, like on campus and catering. So just got to know people and I always gravitated to be in a sort of a leadership position, even early on. Got into graduate studies and did a lot better, and a lot of international students there. So again, we did a lot of teamwork, and I would gravitate into the leadership roles and coordinating the groups. And then finally here in my first faculty job at Georgia Southern, you typically hold off and being like an academic administrator or department chair until you've been here quite a while. But there was a need after, as soon as I was able to fill the role, and the people asked me to do it. So I did that for about 10 years. But all in all these different contexts, the resounding truth to me is that human resources are the most flexible and valuable resources. And that's especially true in supply chains. We've learned that over the last year or so.
I cannot. That is a hallelujah moment. We talk about eureka moments a lot, but that's a hallelujah moment. We interviewed Monica Trilsch with N4 here in recent weeks, and one of her great things she shared, and I'm going to probably butcher this, but she said the people have been the salvation of global supply chain during the pandemic, not technology. And so I completely echo your sentiment there. The human factor is critical. All right. So that's a good one, Jerry. So Les, that's going to be a tough one to add to, but tell us about a key leadership role for you.
Yeah, I think serving as the Army's 66th Inspector General when I thought I was going to retire as a 2-star was seminal. And we won't have time to talk about it in this podcast, but everything you do builds upon something else. And you don't realize what is building toward until you step into the job. And just the difference between the 2-star to the 3-star level is like a different planet. And you understand that, you work for the Secretary of the Army and the Chief of Staff of the Army, who in turn work for the Secretary of Defense, who in turn works for the President. So that's the scope of what level we're talking about.
Wow.
And it can be intimidating until you realize that your entire life, your entire career, again, coming back to what I learned at Georgia Southern about the Southern pride and what it means to be an Eagle, played a key role in that development, which ties back all the way to where I'm from and how I was brought up, and those things are tied together. Because I think we have to make sure we take the time to do the things to help people understand what their potential is and show them the opportunities via who we are and where we've been.
Man, well said. So I got to ask you. So I was an Air Force airman, so I know that a lieutenant general has 3 stars. Now, the Marines and the U.S. Navy structure throws me for a loop, but 3 stars. I don't have the numbers. I should have looked this up.
Yeah.
There can't be that many. I mean, you're one of very few, right?
Yeah. So I tell people all the time, 1.3 million soldiers and civilians, about 350 active duty general officers, 45 of those are 3-star general.
Wow.
So the numbers are, pretty small.
Yeah. That is a very prestigious group. All right. Well, we're going to have you on Veteran Voices, and we'll talk more about that incredible journey. Thank you all for sharing that. Let's go. I mentioned Eureka moment a moment ago. And thankfully, the silver lining in the last couple of years when it comes to supply chain is there's been lots of those, which has driven lots of innovation. It's really attacked a lot of things in our blind spot, which all that and more is going to strengthen industry for the months ahead, the years ahead, and better prepare for the next curveball. Now, we all hope it's not nearly as big of a problem as the pandemic, but there'll be certainly more challenges that test global supply chain. So with all that said, Jerry, I'll come back to you. When you think of your bigger Eureka moments in 2021, let's say, what comes to mind?
Yeah. So for me, I have an interest in this phenomenon that's probably talked about a lot. It's called the bullwhip effect. And that's where you get variability in demand information, and it amplifies from the end consumer all the way up to the manufacturer. And in 2021, it clarified for me that transportation is pervasive between each supply chain link, both inbound and outbound. So the flexibility of transport services and systems are key to handling those disruptions when they happen to crop up in a system. So supply chains can be more resilient, especially through more robust transportation services.
I completely agree. We probably are both, if we could talk to ourselves like from 2017 and say, you're going to hear your words supply chain, someone's going to add a hyphen to it, and you're going to hear bullwhip every other day amongst the general populace, we'd say you're crazy. But that's exactly what we've seen. General Smith, let's talk about your bigger Eureka moment from last year.
Yeah, I think, especially when it comes to supply chain, as the Inspector General, we're responsible for inspections, assistance, and investigations for 1.2 million. There's 1.3 million soldiers and civilians. But what I've saw amongst my peers, and it really takes an entire whole of U.S. Army and government, is when COVID hit, how disconnect is not the right word, how strained our processes and systems already were. And so, you don't think about from a military perspective, what role and part that you play, but that really exacerbated or manifested or showed us what the problems were. That's why we had to mobilize soldiers to go to hospitals. That's why we had to the Defense Acquisition Act to get things in place. So it showed the strain across the board. So the question that we have to think about is, okay, I think some of the terminology was just-in-time logistics, right? That was a good buzzword, but the question is, where should it be in the pipeline? While it might be cheaper initially to have it overseas, what's the risk factor, cost benefit factor to do that? And so the higher you go up in the rank in the military, that's really what you're thinking about. Logistics, how do you get people, equipment, and to the decisive point to make the mission? Because they can't get there, they can't do the mission.
Right. That's right. Well, it can be argued that the military invented logistics, right?
I concur.
So there's always been a lot of synergy.
Yeah.
I would go on to say that beyond the history linkages, my time in the Air Force and my time in the manufacturing industry are very, that's that sense of camaraderie, team, mission. I mean, there's a lot of synergy between the military and global supply chain. Hey, one quick follow-up question, and then I want to talk about what you are doing now. And Jerry, I'm going to come to you and talk about the Vibrant program there at Georgia Southern. You've said it, Inspector General, a couple of times. You were the 66th Inspector General in the Army, I believe. In a nutshell, what does that role do?
So the Inspector General works for the Chief of Staff of the Army and the Secretary of the Army, responsible for those inspections, assistance, and investigation for that 1.3 million soldiers and civilians. I'm a prevention guy. So there's a reactionary part you can be, like something happens and I'm going to jump on it.
Right.
I'm to the left of it. I'm a prevention strategy guy, similar to let's see where the links are, where the problems are, so we can help fix those links before they fray and break. Okay,
man, there's so much,
yes,
Jerry, when it comes to supply chain, man, we could have talk for days about that.
Yes.
Okay. So Jerry, let's revert back to you for a second. Let's talk about what you do now. And then we're going to flow right into the Georgia State University, and then we're going to circle back to General Smith there. Oh, Georgia Southern University.
We're going to have to stop this, man. Come on. You said Georgia State. Come on now.
I've got, all right.
You said Georgia Southern. You just slipped it up.
Okay. Let me call timeout because I've got it written in my notes, Georgia State. I apologize. I've got it written maybe twice.
Yeah,
so
I got it corrected in mine in capital letters.
We will get it right. I promise you.
Hang on, you owe us both dinner and a drink on that one, brother.
All right. What we're gonna do is we'll snip all this out, and what I'm gonna do is based on Les's last response. I'm now gonna revert back to Jerry, and what I thought we'd do for this is, Jerry, tell us about what you're doing now, and go ahead. We'll talk about Georgia Southern University and the program, and then we'll come back. Les, I'm sure you'll have some things away in there, but then we'll talk about what you're up to now as well. Les, does that sound good?
Sounds great.
All right. So Les just told us about the Inspector General, and I just commented about its tie-ins to supply chain, and we're going to pick it back up here in just a second. All right. So Jerry, let's come back to you. I'd love to talk more about what you're doing now, and of course, the Vibrant Supply Chain program at Georgia Southern University. So tell us more.
Yeah, our program's been around since the late 90s. It was kind of an early program in logistics and supply chain with a focus on the transportation management, and then also on the sourcing and supply strategy stuff. So we started out kind of small and built it over time. Now we have about 400 undergraduates enrolled in the supply chain program. We have two sides of it. One is logistics and intermodal transportation, which tends to be the bigger portion. And then we have an operations and supply management side, which maybe is 15% of the students. But we've grown it kind of organically just through good job placements and word of mouth advertising from students and their parents. And then we have a really great faculty here, which surprises a lot of people. We're ranked in the top 25 on certain empirical research ratings around the world. So we do teach well, and we also research well. And we really care about student success here. I think it's not just lip service. And we put our money where our mouth is on that one. We have a logistics roundtable every semester here. We bring 30, 35 companies to campus, and they meet up with about 100 plus students. And they do breakout sessions, and they do like a career networking event where they pass out resumes and business cards. And then we also have a lot of scholarship opportunities for students here. We've developed several through our university foundation. I've sort of gotten one off the ground with the Intermodal Association of North America, and it provides about $45,000 worth of support each year. A lot of that goes straight to tuition scholarships, but some is for travel too, which is another big draw.
Right.
We get our students out there and see what's going on in the field, go to conferences. We go to big event out in Long Beach every year called the IANA Expo, and students get to mingle with some of the industry leaders in intermodal freight.
So it sounds like to me, really being laser focused on the student experience, right? SX and the latest X, maybe providing them opportunities, scholarships, exposure to corporate, the folks that are doing the stuff. And then getting the word out of all of that stuff sounds like a lot of the secrets to all the growth and success. 400 students in the undergraduate. Is that just undergrad?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Outstanding. Okay. So, General Smith, I bet you got a couple things to talk about the robust Georgia Southern University supply chain program.
Yeah, I will tell you that part of the reason why I asked Jerry to be on the net with you today, because it ties in exactly what you're talking about. So as I was retiring, the dean and the president came to me and says, "Hey, we really want to take the W.E. Carter Jr. Chair for Leadership and upgun it a little bit. Not that I could really do that, but they wanted me to upgun it a little bit and put some focus and drive to it. And so this is the first example that we've had the ability to do to highlight all the great things that are happening in Parker College. So that's the first step. In addition to that, the goal is to get our students, which we know are different than your average bear, because you just heard what Jerry talked about, and then get them in front of institutions or organizations in Savannah and in other places, so we can highlight the great things that they do. Not only the great things that they do, but the problems that they can solve for these organizations, because they're thinking through some of the hard problems. So that's part of what I wanted to do as I retired. I wanted to have a suite of things that I had the ability to do. So that's why I stood up that limited liability corporation to do so. So I'm prepared to talk about those as needed.
Yeah, I'm going to circle back. I want to go back to the program just for a quick second, because as we were in the pre-show, Jerry was telling me a little bit, and if I got this wrong, just correct me, Jerry. It happens all the time. But I believe you led the program for a while, and then here recently you're getting back into the classroom more, because that's one of your passions. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a long legacy of great people that kind of spearheaded the undergraduate program. The Department of Logistics and Supply Chain Management was formed about 7 years ago, and I was the inaugural department chair for that group, and have done that all the way through summer of 2021. But we had a really acute need for someone to be in the classroom in our capstone course, and so I stepped out of that administrative role to let someone else handle that for a little while, and I could be in tune with the students and be in the classroom to give them a little value add that course needed.
I love that.
And can I got to interject something here.
Yeah.
That is one of the things that I did not know before I came to Georgia Southern, but it was, I call it the actual, no kidding, what's happening thing. I don't know if that's the right term that you use, but it's what we felt. We didn't know what it was, but I call it the hands-on, taking the academic aspect and talking about what's really happening in the world, and then bringing that together for the students so they can feel it and speak to those terms. So because there are people who've been out there and they talk to those things, and that's how we help bring the realism to the student.
I love it. I can only imagine the impact that has on the overall learning experience, and how much better prepared they'll be when they hit the job market, those members of the now generation. Okay. So thank you for sharing, Jerry. I want to circle back one more time to you, Les, about the LV Smith Corporate Group. A moment ago, you alluded to that. You serve as CEO. Tell us more about what that group's going to be doing.
Yeah, so it's consulting on leadership and other aspects. It's the same venue that I use to sit on corporate boards. I find that the knowledge and experience that I have when it comes to leadership, strategic planning, management, change management across the board is it's not unique, but it's still surprising to me that how much in demand it is. So the skill set, just a plug for our veterans, they bring a unique capability, Scott, as you know, and we have to highlight that. And part of the reason why I'm here at Georgia Southern is to help highlight that leadership aspect, but also highlight what veterans bring to the table. So I kind of use that to do the things that I want to do for myself and for my family.
Okay, man, I bet you and your firm are going to be extremely busy. And I think, again, going back to that prevention mode, that mindset, got so much of business that can benefit from that. All right, so we've talked a lot at various points here about y'all as young people, and then of course the now generation and numerous, as it relates to the program. I want to add another layer because General Smith, with your tenured, successful time in the military, I bet you learned a lot from young troops, So, Jerry, I'll circle back to you and start with, what are all those young people coming through the Georgia Southern University supply chain program? What's something they've taught you?
Well, I've had the great privilege of teaching some of our top students in a case study course, like Les was talking about, getting them in front of actual industry people and tackling problems that are somewhat real, somewhat simulated. I don't know if you can see over my shoulder here, all that glass hardware back there.
Right.
That's first place awards that these teams have won. So they work hard to really represent Georgia Southern and make us proud. So I've learned, that they, if you give them a goal, they're going to work really hard to reach it, which is great, because we often hear about, some of the ambivalence you see in younger generations. But generally speaking, they're very comfortable with technology. And I've learned that, there is a distinction between problem solving and critical thinking mentality. Sometimes they'll just jump in and try to, run the numbers and dig into things and really, really get down in the weeds, but they haven't looked at the big picture yet. And so all of that work sometimes is for naught. So that's something that they've taught me is, to step back and look at the big picture before you jump in with both feet and think you've got a problem to solve. There may not be a problem there at all.
I love that. Before I shift over to Les, how can companies listening to this, how can they, work with those students, maybe give them some problems and some case studies? How does that work?
That's for you, Jerry.
Yeah, Jerry.
Oh, it's for me.
Yeah, can they just reach out to you if they want to be part of that case study and those problem-solving opportunities?
So some of it's formalized. So the Intermodal Association of North America is a great partner. They're a consortium of the ocean carriers, the big railroads, the big trucking companies, all of the equipment providers to those industries, the ports themselves. And they sponsor a academic challenge every year. They used to do 2 a year, now they're down to 1. And so we get plugged into that, and they're really great cases. A consultant named Larry Gross writes a lot of them, and he is very, very good and educational in the cases. And it's hard stuff. I mean, it's hard stuff to solve, and they do a great job with it. And then the different organizations have them around. ASCM has one. And the Denver Transportation Club actually has a great one.
Really?
In February every year, called Operation Stimulus. So I've just gotten plugged into a few around the country and have developed a set of principles and guidelines to help them break these things down and figure out how to solve them in good ways. So that's how we've gotten plugged into it. It's mainly through IANA.
Gotcha. All right. So business leaders, if any of that appeals to you, I bet Mr. Jerry Burke would be willing to take your phone call and see how they could plug y'all into companies, into some of these things they describe. All right. So let's circle back to you. I bet your experiences there, from your earliest ranks up into putting on that 3rd star, you could write maybe a couple of books, but specifically, what are some of the things you learned from those junior enlisted, junior officers, the younger folks coming in?
Yeah, I would say be real, be upfront with them, provide them a vision, and I'm telling you that because it's the same thing I see with my 2 daughters. But be transparent too. We know we weren't perfect coming up, and so the more you can tell your story and the mistakes that you made, then it seems real.
Mm.
And the other part I think that I've learned is that we have to be open to mentorship across familiar lines, across organization lines, because it's that important.
Mm.
And so if you just see just like today, I saw a couple of recruiters, sitting down talking to a young lady. She just so happened to be a biology major. That's what my youngest majored in. And I asked her about going to medical school. And she's like, well, who are you and why are you asking? I just tell people to Google me now, and then they start freaking out. But to that point, though, is that requirement requires me to have the ability to stop what I'm doing, to have a conversation with somebody, which you don't know where it's going to go, but it's important because we owe it to people that are coming behind us to give the mistakes that we made and go from there. I know that was a long answer, but
no, dead on the money. But what both of y'all shared, but on front of your answer, that authenticity is so important these days. All right. So as much as I hate it, sounds like y'all got more lessons to share there, but we got to move on for the sake of time. Supply chain now, imagine that we're all about supply chain. We're big. I'm a big supply chain nerd. We love talking about. It's fascinating right now what we're all experiencing and learning and growing through and fighting through in some cases. Jerry, back to you. You mentioned the bullwhip effect earlier, and of course that has been on the tips of a lot of folks' tongues for the last couple of years. But what beyond that, when you survey global supply chain and where we are and where we're headed and that kind of thing, what's a topic or two that you're really focused on right now?
Well, because of the nature of our program, I'm really pretty laser focused on intermodal freight transportation supply chains, the supply chain system for containerization. So from the concentration of capacity to manufacture overseas around Southeast Asia and China, especially, to the big ocean container vessel alliances, to operations of seaports along the landside distribution networks, how we get it from the seaports inland via truck and rail. That's sort of my main thing. But I've always been a big proponent of risk diversification, sourcing diversification, distribution diversification, and supply chains. So I'm very interested in this 5 corners logistics strategy where they're bringing freight in through the Northwest, the Southwest, the Gulf Coast, Southeast, and the Northeast. So how those dynamics are going to continue and how they got disrupted because of COVID, all of that is very interesting to me right now. And kind of getting some of that congestion away from Southern California. We can handle it over here on the East Coast.
It's amazing to see the growth. Of course, in Savannah, we're kind of spoiled. We got one of the great ports, at least in North America, if not the world. Charleston, just up the East Coast, has done some big things. I think their volume 2021 over 2020 was like 25%, if I saw that right. But where are all the containers? We're it's like, where's Waldo? So there's so much to that story. One quick follow-up question, and I'm gonna come to you, Les. But Jerry, I'm assuming with Savannah just down the road, I think one of y'all mentioned that. I bet y'all have got some pretty strong relationships there where students can even take a look, maybe firsthand, into some of the amazing things that go on at the port there, huh?
Yeah, a lot of them, a fair share get internships over there. Before COVID, we would do a bus tour over there every semester. So they could drive around the port itself and see how those container ports do their magic. And we have alums that work there. We have alums at Jacksport. We have alums at the Port of Charleston. So we're pretty well connected, and our program has a great reputation.
Well, relationships certainly, as it was said the other day, by a United Kingdom leader. So I think he used petro. Relationships are the petro that fuel global business. And that's true. I wholeheartedly believe that. And that's when you can bring them to bear to provide those experiences like you're describing for the students. And it just so happens, one of the great ports is just down the road there in the Georgia ports. Okay. So Les, I want to come to you. When you're talking about, when you're thinking about global supply chain, there's so much to dive into these days. What are you really focused on right now?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I think about, because one of the boards I'm on is in the oil and gas industry. And so they're looking at what does the resiliency look like for their network. if something happens in one location, how can they lift and shift associated with that? I think the other part that I think is going to be a big deal is sustainability. And since I've been here, this trip to Georgia Southern, it's about workforce development and developing the next generation of people who have to work at our ports, our airports, whatever the port is, our networks, because we know us older folks are retiring. And if we don't plan now, I was talking to Savannah Chatham County Superintendent and others about what's the next step. That's one of the real focuses for the president, the dean for the college here, and the provost. What's the next step? Doing it locally, regionally, and nationally, so we understand how do we bring that workforce development. Yeah,
excellent point. Excellent point. And I'm glad you mentioned airports. Some of our listeners maybe would be surprised at how much cargo, how hot air cargo is in general right now, and how much cargo comes through Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, big cog. And they've had some really cool innovations in recent years to make it easier and push more cargo through. All right. So there's always so much to talk about, so little time. I want to one quick follow-up question, going back to you, Jerry. You're talking about diversification amongst, especially when it comes to procurement and sourcing. Options are a good thing, right? Options that we've learned painfully, they're a great thing. Is there any, as you've studied that and had your conversations with business leaders, is there a best practice or an approach that you've seen a company do? When I was in manufacturing, I was in metal parts. Metal stamping was where I spent a couple of years. And I learned firsthand as we were trying to win programs and then produce them, manufacture them, how difficult it can be to find backup suppliers, right? And that was long before the pandemic. Have you seen anything firsthand that you could share that you've seen a company do that really other companies should maybe benchmark?
Well, the one I could think of right away is Boeing. They outsourced a lot of their parts sourcing, and they realized that, even little rivets and things like that don't seem like such a big deal. If they get snarled in the supply chain, then you're out of luck. And so they've sort of brought that back in. The big trade-off with outsourcing is you give up control. And so, if you need to have that control, then you ought to have an ownership piece of it. So you may not own all of the capacity you need for all of the parts, but you should have, your toe dipped in to some of the capacity for most of the parts.
Agreed. I love that. And thank you for sharing. I would add to that. I think one of the things that was reported on earlier in the pandemic, and I think Boeing was one of the companies that Wall Street Journal had pointed out, where these companies were paying earlier to their supply chain partners than their due dates to protect them and protect their supply chains. And that is a wonderful trend here in 2021, 22. Okay. So we're going to have to, I want to make sure folks know how to connect with both of y'all here. Y'all got so much going on. I'll tell you, Georgia Southern University getting General Smith. It's like the Bucks signing the famous quarterback that won the Super Bowl down there. Who was that, Les?
At Georgia Southern, Tracy Ham?
No.
Where?
So
you mean Tampa Bay? The guy we don't like?
Yes, but he was a free agent, and it was a good.
The guy we don't like that beat the Falcons. We don't mention his name. Tom Brady.
Let's not mention.
Okay, Tom Brady. That's his name.
Just for comparison. Okay. Or hey, here's a better one. It's like the Braves trading for Fred McGriff and signing Greg Maddux, right? Which set them up to win that 95, amongst other things, that 95 World Series.
I can agree with that one.
Okay, fair enough. we'll have to snip that part about Tom Brady, because we don't like saying that, his name. Okay. So much good stuff going on at Georgia Southern University, leadership, supply chain, student engagement, you name it. Connecting the now generation with the folks doing it, right? The practitioners, the companies making it happen. Really making for a vibrant learning experience, I bet. Let's make sure folks can connect with you both. So let's start with you, Jerry. How can folks connect with Jerry Burke and learn more about Georgia Southern University?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn. You put my name in with Georgia Southern, you'll find me. Or our web address here, the Department Supply Chain Management, LSCM, as the last extension there, in the Parker College. The directory is there. You can find me via email. I'm kind of old school. I'm not a big social media guy yet.
We got to work on that, Jerry.
Hey, it takes all kinds for sure, right?
It does.
And we'll make sure these links are in the show notes, folks. So if you want to reach out, you want to compare notes with some of the cool things they're doing at Georgia Southern University, you can do just that. And then General Smith, how can folks connect with all the cool stuff you're doing, including here in Georgia?
Yes. So I'm on LinkedIn, Lieutenant General Leslie Smith. You'll see my smiley face. On Instagram is LTG Leslie Smith spelled out, and on Twitter is Smith SMITH LES 2. And yes, I do answer my own tweets and other things from there. We're going to tweet about this today.
Awesome. Hey, we can't, I've been excited about this since we initially got connected, and then we made the connection to Jerry and all the cool things going on here, not too far from where we're having this conversation.
Yeah.
So
hey, is there one other thing I could talk about real quick?
Yeah.
So we are, we're doing something in March, I think is going to be a sea change for Georgia Southern. We have our first Parker gala. It's the business schools gala, and we recognize great things that the university has done and the Parker College has done. And I think it's going to be a great stepping stone to that, helping build that synergy that we talked about before. So that's going to be a big deal. So be on the watch out for those pictures and everything else that comes out of there.
Definitely the Parker Gala.
Parker Gala, March the 5th. I think we're almost sold out. But if Scott, if you act nicely, maybe the dean will help you out.
Hey, I've never been popular with dean, so I don't know. Maybe
Jerry probably has some connections there.
Okay, fair enough. Well, it sounds like that's the place to be, right, Jerry?
Yeah, it's a good place to be. A few days before that, we're going to have our logistics roundtable here on campus. If you want to get plugged into that, you can connect with our career services people here. You can hit, connect with me. I'll connect you with them. We have like about 100 students going to be there. So if you're looking for new talent in your supply chain,
who is it?
Roundtable in Statesboro is the place to be.
Outstanding.
And Scott, if you think about it, that would be a great follow-up podcast. If you don't do it this time, actually talking to the students about what they're learning, what they're seeing, and how can we the enterprise, help them achieve their goals.
Agreed. That's the name of the game. And some of our best episodes, we'll probably be about 840 episodes deep in the main channel by the time we publish this. And some of my favorite episodes have been interviewing, freshmen, college students that are more passionate. They, as y'all both have mentioned, they bring the solutions and the ideas, and they want to break how things have always been done because it's not the best way. So we'll have to tee that up on a later episode. Big thanks to our guests here today. Up first, we had Leslie Smith, Lieutenant General, U.S. Army retired, who also serves as CEO of the LV Smith Corporate Group. Thank you so much, Les, for your facilitation here today.
You're welcome.
And stay tuned. There's more to come. I believe we're going to get some more experiences and stories out of Les here on future episode. And his friend, colleague, Jerry Burke, professor of logistics and supply chain management at Georgia Southern University. Big things happening in Statesboro. Thank you for your time, Jerry.
Hey, my pleasure. Glad to be here.
All right. And we're going to have to get some of your students out next time. Folks, hopefully you enjoyed this episode as much as I have. We had a lot of fun. We compared a lot of notes. I think we're all certainly passionate about not just leadership, but also ensuring that the leaders coming up through the ranks are best prepared and experienced to do the big things that it's in their destiny to do, which is change the world and make the global supply chain craft even stronger and more capable. So on that note, if you enjoy conversations like this, be sure to find Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcast from, subscribe so you don't miss conversations like this with Jerry and Les. But most importantly, folks, challenging you to do good, give forward, be the change that's needed. On that note, we'll see you next time right back here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for being a part of our Supply Chain Now community. Check out all of our programming at supplychainnow.com and make sure you subscribe to Supply Chain Now anywhere you listen to podcasts. And follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. See you next time on Supply Chain Now.